Congress is weighing a $60 billion aid package for those impacted by Superstorm Sandy, as recovery continues in hard-hit communities nearly 2 months after the storm tore through the Mid-Atlantic. Many residents and community advocates have demanded federal authorities do more to assist rebuild and cleanup efforts in middle and working-class communities. In response, FEMA told The Real News it's doing all it can in its power to help those in need, but its resources are limited. The proposed aid package now appears to have enough votes to overcome Republican filibuster in the Senate, but is expected to face stiff opposition in the Republican-controlled House. Fighting the passage of the bill has become a top priority of right-wing billionaire David Koch and his group Americans for Prosperity. In the first part of a 2-part series, The Real News speaks to Joel Kuperfman, a longtime environmental activist and attorney. He sued the EPA on behalf of first responders and residents working and living in the proximity of Ground Zero who were denied medical claims in the years after 9/11. The Real News recently spoke to Kuperfman about why increased aid is needed to fight Superstorm Sandy's environmental and economic impacts.
As the Environmental Justice Committee head of the National Lawyers Guild, I'm really concerned about people being exposed to the mold, to E. coli that's in the water, and it's just bad working conditions. I spoke to many people today and in the last few weeks, and there's concern over workers not getting the right protection. Under the law, if you're a worker, you're entitled to the right personal protection equipment, including the right masks. That's really necessary to stop a lot of the toxins that are in the air, including silica, and a lot of these buildings have asbestos and lead that's coming up, and just the excessive amount of dust that's out there. And also FEMA has not met its task of taking care of the people who need that protection the most. Many residents in FEMA residences and NYCHA housing are asking for money, small amounts of money, to replace their clothing and their furniture that got wet in order to remove the source of that mold. And now they're basically trapped in their places. They can't leave, they have no other place to go, and they're stuck breathing the mold that's in the mold toxins that are coming up. Just for small amounts of money, we could end that problem right away, and yet FEMA has in the beginning, they were promising to do outreach into the community, and as I understand it, people from Washington and FEMA are blocking that outreach, and they're basically taking a one-sided approach and not listening to the community. Neither are they listening to other federal agencies and people on the ground and city agencies that are basically saying you have to help these people, and they're just turning a deaf ear.
And what are the consequences going to be of this inaction on the part of the federal authorities that occupies out here? A lot of activists are out here, volunteers, but they have limited resources. The only people with the vast amount of resources is the federal government.
One thing we've learned from Katrina is that where the resources go, where government goes, determines on who is going to live in an area. And we learned from certain parts of New Orleans that people living there for generations and generations were forced to move out on the grounds that wasn't the right place to live, and yet other people came in, private housing and wealthy private developments came in. Same is happening in New York now, is that people who have been living for generations in certain areas are not allowed to stay, are not given the resources to do it, and the law, we have to look at even environmental law. I'm an environmental attorney. A lot of the developments that took place went basically against good coastal management law. Many people, developers, got exemptions. They got exceptions to the law. They basically prodded their way, through the through the system and got to build where there shouldn't be buildings. So
who's in the hook for that now?
Who's in the hook for it now is the people who have a right to live where they're living, and the city is not coming through. Neither is NYCHA, and neither is HUD. We have to remember that a lot of these people, the head of HUD, Sean Donovan, comes from HPD in the city, which was a Bloomberg appointee. We're concerned about the head of CDC, comes out of the Department of Health, the same Department of Health in the city that told us that the air was clean to breathe after 9/11, and there's a really slow cleanup. But also one thing we got to learn after 9/11 is that we sent hundreds and thousands of workers into Lower Manhattan to do the cleanup, and we demanded I and other groups demanded that they do a medical surveillance, a medical baseline for those workers to figure out if they were safe and they were capable of working, and also what they had before, ailments they had before, and what they have now. When they all got sick, they went for workers' comp, and every case was controverted. The city or the insurance company said you were sick before. It wasn't from 9/11 exposure. What we have here again is the same story repeating itself. In probably 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, you're going to see thousands and thousands of worker comp cases, people trying to get money because their lungs are filled up, their lungs are cooked, and yet all these insurance companies are going to claim, nope, you were sick before, you smoked in high school, and bits like that. So I just can't believe that the story is just repeating itself.
I've talked to a lot of people that are sick or their kids are sick, and no one is giving them answers. Like their doctors think it might be seasonal, or they don't know, and they're not hearing anything from the government or any authorities that might be able to test the air quality.
Part of the problem is we have an environmental health disaster that's going on. The Health and Human Services Secretary declared New York and New Jersey to be a health emergency area. So that alone should trigger a lot of responses, and that has not happened. We urge people who are suffering from any type of respiratory exposure, illnesses, problems, that they should see a occupational environmental health clinic. Mount Sinai or Bellevue or North Shore, Long Island Jewish have people. They should see doctors who are familiar with these type of problems. And not only that, it's incumbent upon the city and the state and the feds to gather the information to start knowing where the clusters are. And as I understand, up until now, they haven't been really outreach, in doing that. The private doctors are not being asked by the health department, what are you seeing? So it's important that people get that information out. And as we understand also that there's been medic groups that are going around and doing a people's epidemiology, and we applaud that. But that's a good partial step. It's up to the state, the feds to step in.
And finally, what's it going to, you talked about a lot of inaction. What's it going to take to get people to the authorities to actually act at this point?
I think it's going to be more than just this is the first step. One of the first steps is this march today, but we have to apply pressure on every legislator out there that has experienced what went down 10 years ago, from 9/11 to today. And also we have to demand that the mayor, the governor, and President Obama put full resources that are at their command to help people.
Thank you so much.
Residents and activists are urging Congress to pass the $60 billion Sandy aid bill as soon as possible. Reporting for The Real News, this is Jessel Noor in New York.